Climaguard must be applied over solid decking with a minimum roof pitch of 312 or greater. The first flashing focused on is the WEF1 Eave trim, which is to be installed prior to the roofing underlayment. The WEF1 is intended to be used on roof pitches up to 612. For roof pitches greater than 612, a two-piece Eave trim of WEF2 and WEF3 can be used. Within this video, the WEF1 will be used. Place the top of the WEF1 trim in line with the substrate and fasten to the decking 18 inches on center with roofing nails. The Eave trim will be fastened along the fascia with number 14 screws, spaced 16 inches on center. The next segment will show how to flash two Eave trims that meet at a valley and a hip. Note, the use of graphite pencils on painted steel will corrode over time. Cut the trim as shown or needed and attach as described previously with roofing nails and screws. Take note of the angles cut to allow for the trims to overlap. Sealant should be used between any trims that overlap. Now that all the Eave trim has been fastened, the underlayment can be attached. Cover the entire roof with 30-pound felt paper or titanium underlayment. Ice and water shield should be used at all valleys, chimneys, and skylights. In cold climates, ice and water shield should be used at the eaves and extend 24 inches past the exterior walls. The installation of the underlayment is started at the eave at a gable end and rolled out parallel to the eave line. Allow each consecutive course to overlap the previous by 4 to 6 inches. Overlap the end a minimum of 6 inches when starting a new roll of underlayment. Areas that have been torn or cut should be replaced or repaired prior to installation of the Climaguard panel. At sidewall and end wall conditions, continue the underlayment a minimum of 6 inches up the wall and fasten. To prepare for installation of the first panel, apply a bead of butyl sealant along the eave trim. The next section will go into detail on cutting and hemming a panel. Make a mark 1 inch up from the end of the panel and cut along the base of each rib with snips. Use the bending tool to form a hem under the pan. Cut off the underlap rib completely. Remove inboard leg and rib top from overlap rib with tin snips. Bend tab around rib and cut flush. Place an alignment line along the gable end 1/2 inch from the edge and square with the eave line. This is where the first panel will be started. Set butyl sealant tape along the eave trim. Place the first panel with overlap leg along the alignment line. In cold weather, slide the panels tight against eave flashing, and in warm weather, allow a gap for expansion. Fasten panel side with number 10 pancake head screws and the top of the panel with 3 number 14 mill points. The second panel is installed in the same fashion. Place sealant over underlap rib before sliding hem over eave trim. Snap first 2 to 3 inches of panel together and slide the panel tight against the eave trim or with a gap depending on the temperature. Snap the panels together and fasten along the opposite side and top of the panel. The eave hem can be tightened by crimping with duckbill vice grips or flanging tool after installation is complete. The next step shown is attaching the WGF1 gable trim over the panel. To finish off the end, cut along the bends and fold top plane down 90 degrees towards eave trim and cut other flaps flush. To view other options on finishing off the gable, review the Climaguard installation manual. Install a bead of sealant tape along rib of panel. Lay gable trim in place. Fasten along fascia board every 24 inches on center with number 10 wood-fast or number 14 mill-point screws. The final step is to attach the ridge cap. This video shows a vented ridge cap with RX10 VersaVent material that is pre-attached before shipping. Place the ridge cap over the panel and fasten with number 12 stitch screws through each rib. Overlap the next ridge cap 6 inches with sealant between the laps. Focusing on the valley area, the first step is to place ice and water shield centered down the valley. Cut the valley flashing to the angle and length needed to secure over the ice and water shield. Apply roofing underlayment in shingle effect on top of valley flashing. You are now looking at the next flashing to be installed, which is the WVC-1 valley cleat. First, apply a bead of butyl sealant tape to the bottom side of the valley cleat. Position the valley cleat 6 inches away from the center of the alley. Fasten with number 10 pancake head screws at 12-inch spacing. Now that the valley cleat is installed, we are ready to start cutting and hemming panels for the valley. Before installing the panels, place a bead of butyl sealant tape along the eave flashing and on top of the valley cleat as shown. This is a shot of what the panel will look like and how it will be placed on the roof when finished. Cut the Climaguard panel at the appropriate angle and length to allow for a 1-inch hem at both the eave and valley cleat. This is done by cutting along the rib so the bending tool can be used to complete the hem. To finish off the overlap rib, cut the metal to allow the inside flap to fold over the opening where it can be cut flush with the edges. Installing the panel can be done by placing sealant over the underlap rib and aligning the panel before snapping the panels together. Once aligned, snap the panels together, working from the eave up the run of the panel. Secure the top of the panel with number 14 millpoint screws. To finish off a panel at the gable end or sidewall, first determine the width of the panel needed. Many panels will not end as a full sheet and need to be cut and bent to make a 1-inch high flange as shown in this picture. Using the bending tool, bend the 1-inch flange down the length of the panel. Partial bends may need to be performed along the length of the panel for longer runs till the desired bend is achieved. If the panel is used for a gable end, attach sealant along the 1-inch high flange and secure with the WGF4 gable trim as previously described. In this video, the panel is used as a sidewall condition with the WSW4 flashing. Place a bead of sealant over the 1-inch flange and set the flashing in place and fasten with number 10 pancake head screws every 12 inches on center. The next segment shows one method of how to finish off the hip with a hip cap and closures. The method shown will use a J-trim and an asphalt-impregnated sealer strip to close off the void created between the hip cap and the flat of the panel. First, place butyl sealant tape in the pan of the panel where J-trim will go. Cut J-trim to the desired shape and position the trim in the pan of the panel over the sealant. Screw fasten trim to the panel with number 10 pancake screws or number 14 millpoint screws. Use 1 part polyurethane sealant up the back side of the closure, near the ribs, and over the flange to seal gaps. If using asphalt-impregnated sealer strip as shown in the top left panel, lay the strip across the panel and apply butyl sealant on top and bottom. When the top of the panel meets a wall, it is finished off by using a closure strip with butyl around the perimeter and set in place on the panel. Place a line of sealant across the tops of the J-trim and closure strip before attaching the hip closure. Place the hip cap down and fasten with number 12 stitch screws at every rib. Note the bottom of the hip cap was bent down to give a finished appearance. Returning back to our end wall condition, place the WEW2 flashing over the closure and screw through the main ribs with number 12 stitch screws.